This is the novel Cost. And when I started that, I wanted to write I was really interested in a particular family dynamic, which is the in-between generation. Julia is in her 50s, I guess, and she's an artist. She's divorced, and she has her own life, and she's a teacher, and she's got two sons in their early 20s, and she's got parents in their late 70s, I think. And so you would think that she would be able to just lead her own life. Her sons are out of school, they're on their way, her parents are healthy. And yet that middle generation is always being called on for caretaking, basically, which is mostly a woman's job. And she is very definitely called on that. But that wasn't how I started. What I started with was the idea of being a bad adult child. And I was struck by the fact that in my own life, and I think in others too, that no matter what age you are, when you are with your parents, you can open your mouth and you hear the voice of a sulky 6-year-old or a cruel and snobbish teenager or a very superior 21-year-old, and you can't help it. And you love your parents, and you aren't intending to be this way, but you are still always a child with your parents. So I wanted to write a short. It was all going to take place in 2 weeks at this old farmhouse on the Maine coast. Julia and her parents and her sons show up, and it was going to be small and tender, and just what it's like to be in the middle of that generation. And also, the process of aging. What was it like for her parents? Her mother is suffering from early stage dementia. Her father is starting to have physical ailments. And what is it like for them? Do they want to reveal to their daughter that they're no longer really able to manage the way they always have before? Are they afraid of doing that? Do they want her sympathy? And for her, what is it like for her to see her parents start to falter? Does it irritate her, which is a really terrible response, but it's really normal that children don't want to see their parents start to fail. And what is it like for the son? So I started out with this. It was going to be short. I always think my novels are going to be short, and it's not going to take me very long to write them. So it's going to be this short book that took place completely within 2 weeks in the house in Maine, 3 generations. It was going to be 5 voices, but then Julia turned out to have a sister. So 2 voices in each generation. And it starts out in the mother's voice, and she can't remember things, and she wants to hide that from her daughter. It goes to the husband and the daughter. And then I moved into the older son's voice, Stephen. And he's on a bus on his way up to Maine to visit his mother, because he knows she wants him there. And he knows she's going to say, "Have you seen Jack, your younger brother?" And he has just seen Jack, and he is reliving that encounter. And as I move in Stephen's mind into Jack's apartment and see what it looks like, I realize, oh my God, Jack is a heroin addict. This is a completely different book. My book has been blown out of the water. Now I have to spend 5 years learning about heroin addiction. And it was really fascinating to me. I didn't know anything about it before I started. And I went to NA meetings, and I interviewed addicts, and I talked to policemen, and I talked to hospital workers and interventionists, and I talked to many addicts and family members, and learned a lot about the process and what it does to people, and what it does to the family, and listening to the stories. I mean, for a novelist, reading people's letters and listening to their stories is like eating chocolates. I love listening to people's stories, but it was heartrending to hear the stories that you hear in those meetings. And I was very, very filled with admiration and tenderness for the people who are going through those things, because they are so difficult to stop, and people struggle so hard with them. And one of the meetings that I went to a meeting in Midtown Manhattan one day. And if you go online, you can find an NA meeting anywhere, anytime. pretty much. It's certainly in the city, that's true. I never told my husband what I was doing, because part of being a novelist is being secretive. And so he would leave the apartment, and then I would race to my computer and find a meeting, and then I'd go to it. And I was at a Midtown meeting, and it was a lunch meeting. So a lot of people there were in suits and business clothes. And I was sitting in the back. It was at a church. And the guy behind me was making a lot of noise. And I thought, this is so rude. Everybody here is being very respectful and very polite. And this guy is going, he started to snore, and he was snoring very loudly, just, and I thought, I was waiting for somebody to say, excuse me, if you want to sleep, could you move into another room? No one looked at him. No one said anything. They kept on with the meeting. And finally, I got it. He just shut up. He'd just taken heroin. He was nodding off, but he wanted to quit. That's why he was at the meeting. And everyone understood that. Everyone respected the fact that this was his effort, his attempt to get clean. And he hadn't made it yet, but he was trying. So every time I went, I heard something that was so moving and so touching to me about that community. It was an incredible education for me. When I am writing a novel, and it sort of takes on its own, it generates its own narrative. So this unfolded the way the family would find it. It's first, Stephen tells his mother she doesn't believe him. That's really normal. You don't want to believe that. Then she starts believing it. Then she tells her ex-husband, he doesn't believe it. And Jack, being an addict, is completely manipulative and doesn't care what he does. And he'll rob a drugstore, and he'll do anything. And Jack actually doesn't want to quit. So he's really not going to save this story. But each scene unfolded because of the beginning. So there's Sarah and her ex-husband meeting the interventionist, and what is he going to be like, and can they trust him? And they hate this, and they don't want to be told what to do by an outside expert. This is their family, and how much do they tell her mother? And there were so many things that I didn't plan, but that came out in the course of every scene. And each new piece of information is painful. It's damaging. Sarah realizes that Jack was stealing from her before, and of course, your parents are the first people you steal from because they trust you. So all those things just became part of this molten mass that was seething and functioning as I was investigating it. You can't really end a story about an addict saying that he quit and he's fine, because addiction never ends. So in order to reach any kind of resolution, the addiction has the last word. So for the purposes of a formal aspect of the book was that the addiction wins, but that doesn't ruin the family. The family is damaged, but has to survive. So I didn't plot that book out, but I could feel what was happening as it progressed.